Hello, and welcome to the city's Department of Planning and Development's information session on medium and large community development grants.
Today, we will be discussing the basics of the medium and large community development grants, or CDG programs, which we will refer to in this presentation as medium and large grants. Topics that will be covered include applicant eligibility requirements, grant program criteria, the grant application process, and the grant application review process.
As mentioned, our first topic is applicant eligibility. So who can apply for medium and large grants? Private and nonprofit tenants or lessees are eligible to apply, as are private and nonprofit property owners or lessors. Additionally, private and nonprofit business owners who are also the property owners or owner-occupied are eligible to apply. Lastly, social service and religious organizations are eligible to apply, but the projects for which they are applying must have a primary use that is an eligible use under the program requirements, which we'll discuss in a minute, and the entirety of the project must be accessible to the public during all hours of operation.
Now that we know who is eligible to apply for medium and large grants, let's discuss the CDG program criteria, beginning with what the CDG program funds. First, we'll discuss eligible project types. The CDG program funds capital or real estate development projects, either through construction of a new structure or new building addition, rehabilitation of an existing structure, or a combination of both new construction and rehabilitation. Think of capital grants as brick and mortar grants that fund physical locations, which must be predetermined at the time of application. Second are the eligible project uses. The eligible project use must be the permanent primary use of the project and may exist on its own, independently, or in combination with another eligible use. The eligible uses comprise commercial uses, which include office, retail, and general commercial, cultural uses, which include galleries, museums, and performance venues, industrial and manufacturing uses, institutional uses that include healthcare and higher education, residential use that includes 10 or more units, which are subject to the affordable requirement ordinance and have a ground floor that is 100% commercial, and social service uses, which include workforce development interventions for vulnerable populations. Lastly, our eligible project costs, which are how grantees may spend their grant funds for reimbursement. All grant funds are issued by reimbursement, meaning all grantees must first incur eligible project costs to receive payment of their grant funds. Costs that are eligible for reimbursement include hard costs, which are costs associated with construction and permanent building improvements, soft costs, which are costs associated with professional services and fees related to hard costs, and acquisition costs, which are costs associated with acquiring real estate and property for the project. All projects with acquisition costs must include an equivalent or greater amount of hard costs. Medium and large grants are for real estate development, not simply real estate.
Now that we've discussed what the CDG program funds, let's review what the program does not fund. Project types that are ineligible for medium and large grants include projects that are 100% complete, meaning the project is fully constructed and operational, projects with an eligible use or uses that are conditional, temporary, or secondary to an ineligible use. An example of this would be a religious organization that rents a room in its religious structure once a week to a social service organization. The primary use in this example is religiously affiliated, and the secondary use is a social service. Additionally, projects that are partially or wholly inaccessible to the public during hours of operation are ineligible, as are projects seeking grant funds only to correct deferred maintenance issues, such as boiler replacement. Those addressing only minor site or structural issues, such as a patio, and those conducting court-ordered building repairs, such as a collapsed roof or fence repair. While deferred maintenance, site repairs, and court-ordered repairs on their own constitute ineligible project types, they are eligible uses of grant funds when combined with a larger construction or redevelopment project. Project uses that are ineligible under the medium and large CDG program are primary and secondary education of any kind, private, parochial, public, or charter, daycares, and any use promoting or incorporating any religious teachings. This includes social services operated by religious organizations that incorporate religious teachings into the social service offerings. Lastly, project costs that are ineligible for reimbursement of grant funds include operational expenses of any kind, such as rents, payroll, travel, and supplies, surface parking lots of any kind unless required and used as an engineered barrier for environmental remediation, and hard costs related to furniture, fixtures, and equipment, or FF&E. While FF&E cannot be reimbursed as a grant cost, it can be included as part of the total project costs when determining the grant amount as a percentage of total project costs.
Okay, so we know who can apply for medium and large grants and what the grants fund and don't fund, and now we'll discuss how much money the CDG program offers. As we've mentioned during the presentation, there are medium and large community development grants. There are also small community development grants run by a different group of staff here in DPD. For reference, the small CDG program offers up to $250,000. More information on that program can be found on the city's Community Development Grants website. Medium grant amounts range from $300,001 to $5 million, funding up to 50% of total project costs, not to exceed $5 million. There are several sources of funding for the medium grants and different funding structures, which, in addition to the grant amount, are all determined by DPD staff. An applicant does not need to submit multiple applications to be considered for funding from the different sources. One application is sufficient. Medium grant applicants may be eligible to receive the local residency bonus. If the project location and the applicant's residential address are both in the qualified investment area, the applicant may receive an additional 25% of total project costs, not to exceed $500,000. While the applicant may receive up to 75% of total project costs with the bonus, the total grant may not exceed $5 million. Therefore, if 50% of a total project cost is $4,700,000, the applicant may only receive a local residency bonus of $300,000. Acceptance of a medium grant requires the grantee to execute a legally binding redevelopment agreement with the city, which holds the grantee accountable for fulfilling the city's construction compliance requirements and for adhering to a 5-year compliance period. Depending on the funding source, some projects may require city council approval. Large grants are more than $5 million, generally funding between 20 to 30% of total project costs. As with the medium grants, the funding structure, source, and amount of large grants are all determined by DPD staff. Large grant applicants are not eligible for the local residency bonus. Like medium grants, large grant recipients are subject to executing a legally binding redevelopment agreement with the city, which obligates them to the city's construction compliance requirements and a 10-year compliance period. Unlike medium grants, all large grant projects are subject to city council approval regardless of funding source.
You now know who can apply for medium and large grants and what you can do with the grants. So let's talk about how to apply for a grant. Applications for both the medium and large grants are accepted on a rolling basis, meaning anytime throughout the year. Medium grant projects are selected for funding twice a year, with deadlines to be considered for selection in February and August of each year. The deadlines are posted on the CDG website, so please keep an eye out for new dates as funding rounds close. Prospective medium grantees should apply for funding when they are most ready, instead of rushing an application to a funding deadline. Projects are selected for large grants throughout the year on a case-by-case basis when the application is received. All prospective medium and large grantees must apply through the platform Submittable, which requires free registration. The link to the application can be found in this presentation, as well as on the city's Community Development Grant website. In addition to the application, you can find the medium and large grant application guide on the respective grant websites. Lastly, medium grant applicants can expect the review process to take approximately 5 months from the closing of the funding round to the grant finalist announcement. So for example, medium grants submitted by a deadline in February can expect a determination in June, and so on. Large grant applicants can expect the review process to take approximately 3 to 4 months from receipt of application to applicant notification of finalist status. Whether applying for a medium or large grant, all applicants will be notified if they were or were not selected for a grant.
One of the most common questions we receive is how we review projects. Once an application is received, DPD staff first determine if the project is eligible for the grant requested based on the requested amount of funds and the proposed project uses. If a project is determined ineligible for grant funds based on one of the criteria discussed earlier in the presentation, it is not reviewed further and the applicant is notified that the project is ineligible and why. If a project is determined to be eligible for grant funds, it is evaluated by the criteria on this slide. First, the project site is evaluated for PINs with clean titles that are free of unpaid taxes, current liens, and court orders, a detailed description of existing conditions, and photos that comprehensively capture the proposed project site and all existing structures. Second, the proposed project uses are evaluated for compliance with current zoning and, if not, evidence that the applicant is aware of the zoning issues, the identification of all project occupants at completion, and if these occupants are all registered with the Illinois Secretary of State in good standing. Applicants should have all non-residential project occupants identified and secured when the application is submitted. Third, the project impact is evaluated by the type of business or organization being proposed, the services being proposed, and their associated impacts on surrounding uses, the impacts on existing and proposed business operations and the surrounding community, and a detailed accounting of proposed structural work. Fourth, the project documents are evaluated for evidence of site control, which can include an executed letter of interest or lease for the proposed site, of 5 or more years for a medium grant, or 10 or more years for a large grant, a real estate contract for the proposed site, a deed for the proposed site, or, if looking to purchase city land, documentation that a Chi Block Builder application for the site has been submitted and accepted. Evidence of tenant leases or LOIs of 5 or more years for a medium grant and 10 or more years for a large grant. Evidence of design documents, which can include site plans, elevations, and/or renderings. Evidence of a contractor estimate dated within the last 6 months from a certified contractor. Evidence of outside financing to support project costs that are not covered by the grant request, which can include bank statements, loan term sheets, or letters of interest, gifts of funds and/or additional subsidies from other organizations, and evidence of any phase 1 or phase 2 environmental studies that have been conducted on the site. Fifth, the project budget and financing are evaluated for a complete developer input form, including the development assumptions, development costs, and capital stack sheets, balanced project sources and uses, project uses that match the line items and amounts in the contractor estimate, project sources that are fully financed outside of the grant request, and a detailed financial needs statement. Sixth, the project site characteristics are evaluated for its location in a community area on the southwest or southwest sides, whether the building is a Chicago landmark, contributing building, or orange rated, if the site is city or county owned, if the property is vacant, and if it has been vacant for 24 or more consecutive months.
Another question we often get asked is what helps a project get selected for a grant? We recommend that all applicants assemble a project team comprised of a financial institution, an architect, and a contractor. These individuals will bring expertise that is beneficial to submitting a successful application. We cannot stress enough how important it is to review the application prior to completing it, answer each question in full, and attach all required documentation. It is the sole responsibility of the applicant to provide all requested documents and to ensure that everything submitted is accurate, up to date, and consistent across the entire application prior to submittal. There is no opportunity to submit updated documentation for medium grant applications once the submission deadline has passed. However, if a medium grant applicant is able, we recommend applying well in advance of the funding deadline so that DPD staff can review the application and provide the applicant with a deficiency letter if warranted. This will allow the applicant to correct any issues and resubmit the application prior to the funding deadline for final evaluation. A large grant applicant will automatically receive a deficiency letter if the project is eligible but denied funding. Lastly, and most importantly, Applying for a grant does not guarantee a grant. We receive upwards of 200 applications each round and award approximately 10 grants per round. That's a 5% acceptance rate. Keep in mind that all applicants are notified if their projects are or are not selected for funding. Applicants whose projects are not selected for funding may apply for future funding rounds, but simply resubmitting the same application again will render the same results. Applicants are encouraged to review their original responses in relation to the application questions to ensure they were answered completely, and may request a deficiency letter from DPD, which outlines any issues with their application. These are competitive grants with limited funding sources. Therefore, most projects will not be selected for funding. This shouldn't discourage you from applying for a grant, but it should reinforce the importance of submitting a thoughtful and comprehensive application for a significant, impactful, and feasible project.
Finally, we'll end with some frequently asked questions regarding the award process. As we mentioned earlier in the presentation, medium grant applicants can expect to be notified about their application status within 5 months of the funding deadline. Large grant applicants can expect to be notified within 3 to 4 months of applying. We do not have a quota to meet, prescribed number of projects that we must award, or predetermined funding amount for each round. The number awarded depends on the quality of applications received each round and available funding. Grant amounts are calculated based on the strength of the application, the total project costs, the requested amount, the overall financial need, and any available funds. All applications are reviewed at the close of each funding round, regardless of when they are received. Applications that are received earlier do not receive funding priority. City funds that are awarded through the medium and large grant programs cannot be accessed outside of the application process.
This concludes our presentation. For additional medium and large grant resources, including the grant program manuals, the application guide, more FAQs, and the application links, please visit the city's Community Development Grant website linked here. If you have additional questions, please email FID_intake@cityofchicago.org.